Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spin Rack, and we also have.
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
So today we want to talk about something, a problem that everyone has with your current comic books or even your movies or your entertainment, and it's something called the exposition dump, or what people used to be okay with, the basic monologue, or just dialogue. Why do they come up with these weird words for things of in plot? Whereas at times there's times where we don't have issue with it, and there are times that we do. But as of right now, people can't wait to throw the exposition dump. And well, before we get into trying to show any examples, what do you think about that sort of thing?
Well, this reminds us once again, this reminds us once again of the importance of education, because this is storytelling, and it's a it's a part of storytelling that you can't get away from if you want to actually understand what is going on. Now, there are times when it's done well, and there's times when it's not. But to label all of it as the same, no. And but that goes into the whole postmodernist thing that I've been discussing with you off screen. So that's pretty much where it is. I mean, it's like being angry at a building, for having steel girders. Oh, look, steel girders. You need it. It supports the story at the end of the day. Now, of course, if they're shoddy and the workmanship is shoddy, you don't want to go into a building and actually see the girders. That makes you feel like, well, how safe is this building? But you definitely want to know that those things are there because you're going to be supported. Okay, you're in a safe structure, et cetera, et cetera. It's no different with the story. It's a part of the story that has to be there in order to have full enjoyment of it, unless you're just happy to go into a story with a big parts of it unknown to you, which I'm pretty certain that you complain about. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have, oh, we got the exposition dump, they're explaining this type of stuff that's terrible, and then go to the other side, hey, I have no idea what's going on.
Well, that's one of the harder things, and that goes along trying to be cool or trying to just be like in the know and being like, hey, look at that exposition dump. Like we're sitting there and it's just like, okay, at some point we have to get forth some information, especially when most of the stuff we're talking about is like the stuff that's like you see the audition for what's her name, Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, where she has to say these things as if they're believable, like she understands the stuff, and she does it because this is even if you don't understand the information, it's important saying this sounds important, this thing sounds important, and this is what we need to get through. And that's one of the things that people kind of lose in trying to just be cool and trying to be insulting when at the same time they give leeway to other stuff. Now, I just wanted to do a quick example of what today's reader would look at and be like, how could they get away with something like this? This is a crime. So I'm going to use these scans, and we go to Fantastic Four 25, right? And it's the Hulk versus the Thing. So ultimately, it's a lot of dialogue, and it also has a lot of description there. So this is one of the things. Like Marvel is hitting. Like Marvel is a success with Stan, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and this, that, other. When you get to this, so when the Hulk returns to Earth, we see him up in the air. Obviously, he returned to Earth. But as a kid, and that was less like I think my brother at some point we would read these things together just to get some of the gags and the jokes that the Thing would say and all the funny stuff of this sort of banter that was going back and forth. So it was like every portion of it was interesting. And Stan was also doing a style where he was almost the narrator of his own books. So it was kind of giving you something that he learned in literature that he was bringing forth into the comic books. But today's audience would look at it and be like, "Oh, this is a sin right there. Look at that. He has that and this. Oh, look, talking head here. So he's a little talking head. It's like, well, what do you think they're supposed to do with a talking head? He's supposed to be talking. He's supposed to. That's why you have scenes where people are set up and they're talking, using a lot of dialogue. Why would you not use a lot of dialogue in a talking head scene? It's like if you look at The Walking Dead, where that's the thing. You look at The Walking Dead, it's a multitude of talking head. It's a talking head book, But at the same time, what's the content? And when people buy into the content, then they're like, oh yeah, and we're going to show some other examples of that. But Stan would be the one that people would go and complain about. And then at the same time, you look at this stuff and you're just like, this is like, in my mind, has always been the best fight ever. Like this thing, whenever I see this blows away even like, when Thing is fighting the champion. And when people say, oh, that was so great, like, no, no, no. Like this is a fight. That is something where they're trying to do the what's the name, but you can see, like he gets hit in that, and then they said, but the Hulk really shrugs off the impact and charges back into the battle, right? And it's just like you're like, oh, this is a sin. Like, no, this is classic. Like this, you had to write like this. So DC had to develop this sort of thing into their books. Not, I mean, Danny O'Neill was able to work Marvel, and then when we went to Batman, he didn't sort of do this sort of thing. I mean, I'm not sure about the description, but his tone of dialogue with Batman was different. But this is what even Kirby had to compete with when he went to somewhere else. This was like the pinnacle of dialogue at this point. So.
Right, but it's also who's the audience at this time. Okay, the audience, it's not a bunch of grown people, prouting their self-importance, and there's pseudo-intellectualism at the end of the day. It's kids. Yeah. I'm reading through this right now. If I read through this as an adult, I could definitely say, well, maybe I don't need it. But as a kid, no, it works. All of this type of stuff. The narration builds suspense, it builds anticipation, it builds shock, there's a connectivity between everything. I mean, it's just really good. I mean, it's just good. It's just good stuff. It's good. It's great storytelling, especially with the. I mean, I was actually taking the time. I'm listening to you and looking through it, and reading through it at the same point, and I'm like, why did this work so much? Because again, it's hitting that particular audience. Okay, and even then, as an adult, I'm reading through all of this, and it doesn't miss a beat, because between the comic books are different. It's not film, it's not prose, it's a mixture of the images, those images. There's just so much that can be done with it at the end of the day. It merges a lot of that stuff. So you get these great images of what's going on, but then you have those descriptions that are going on that actually intensify it. So it's not just you. Okay, it's literally you got somebody over. It's literally you have somebody over there, like a newscaster, who's coming in, like when they give you the play-by-play when you're watching the baseball game.
Yes.
You can see it. Okay, you can see it, but that newscaster at the end of the day is like, intensifies it. So, just really good stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, we can't swear, because if it was up to me, I'd be cursing at this point. Because I was like, how can you look at this and not get it? How can you look at this and not get it? And then you have to have some comparison of what, I mean, because they were doing this before, the whole captions, if you will. They were doing all this stuff before, Stan was doing it. But you look at the difference in his approach.
Yeah.
You look at the difference in his approach, where literally it's almost like Stan is your grandfather, and you're sitting on his knee, and he's like doing that interplay with you as the reader. So there's more connectivity between the story and the reader. Like literally, like this, like an older person, if you will, like, oh wow, look at that, look at how this happened over here. Isn't that cool? Isn't this great? Oh, can you wait to see what happens on the next page? All the good stuff at the end of the day, and strictly, great for that audience. But still, just in terms of writing, without the appreciation and the understanding of it, it can fall flat. Especially if you're too busy just scanning a book. Look, exposition.
That's one of the things I think. When watching cartoon kayfabe, which do great sort of overviews of stuff, they were kind of separating. Like they took Jim Lee's X-Men #1. We're going to show something to Jim Lee next, but like they were taking it and extracting the dialogue of saying this panel doesn't work, but it's the words that are kind of that. And that's one of the things the quality that even though Chris Claremont had some of the greatest storytellers. Like we'll show this is different because we have Kirby stuff, and Kirby stuff basically can do like a silent film of it. But at the same time, the synergy works so much better. But then the thing you also said, people scanning through instead of saying, his dialogue keeps me on this page for a decent amount of time. So I'm looking at this, and if I'm going at it for the art, and I'm saying I'm picking out my favorite pictures, and I'm concentrated on the thing, punching the Hulk, and that sort of thing, or I'm saying this shot I want to draw, like you're stuck on this thing for a decent amount of while. You're taking it in, and that's one of the cool things about having a decent amount of dialogue. Because in the boxing match, you only what is the name? Come on, Clay. Come on, come on, Frazier, you ugly, this, that, and the other. It's not gonna be. It's gonna be those. It's gonna be like I don't know if I'm gonna show a Savage Dragon in there because his splash page thing goes very quickly, and that's one thing you can see when, especially do all splash pages. People talk about the Simonson one. Will Simonson used a lot of captions and a little bit of dialogue, but they do have a couple of passages where they talk a lot. But it's like they have a lot of captions because it's only 22 panels, right? It's taking like this is half of the action that would be in that Thor 380, but the fact that he's keeping you on it, that's one thing you have to remember, that this dialogue keeps you on the page for a while rather than say who talks in the fight. It's comic books, and as a kid you're not sitting around there saying, yeah, you know what, sometimes I wouldn't be talking. Well, they're also the thing that what Stan is also doing. They're goading each other. They're kind of giving each other lip back and forth, and that
and they're
plays to a real
and they're superpowered beings. They can talk in the fight if they want to.
fight.
They're not regular. They're not regular people. We're like, okay, I gotta reserve my air and this type of stuff. Oh, I'm talking too much now. I lost the fight. No, this is the Hulk and the Thing. They've got more than enough air capacity if we have to go that route. They've got more than enough air capacity to wallop each other and still have a conversation. And good for us that they do, because if not, these would just be a whole bunch of silent panels at the end of the day, and we wouldn't have the classic fight that we have. I mean, could you imagine this fight? Oh, it's like you remember what was that Daredevil 181, that fight between Daredevil and Bullseye?
Yeah, yeah.
It's all silent, but it works. Why? Because Daredevil is avenging the death of Elektra. He's got nothing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's
Yeah.
got nothing to say to this dude. This is just going to be a beatdown from start to finish. This is just going to be a fight. Okay, and then we finally get some words towards the end of it. If you put dialogue into that, you killed her, you did, it totally changes that fight. It's the same thing for this. Could you imagine this fight and you took out all the dialogue?
Yeah. And then you go,
It's not the same.
yep. And you're not having like getting the two different, because the Hulk and the Thing at one point were very similar. You could see them start to change where Hulk isn't fully Hulk smash. Has some a little bit of intelligence here, but it's like there's more sort of like this confidence of the Hulk and sort of the insults of the Thing, where the Hulk is more into his, like how confident he is, and getting a different tone where you finally say, oh, that whereas when they first met, it was very similar. So, go. I want to go quickly to. I keep saying the quickly part, but it's not always the case. But, so, are you seeing this right here? This Magneto page?
Yeah.
Let me make sure because it looks like I'm not seeing the green line around it. It should see. Okay, now I'm seeing it again. All right. So we have this. We have this X-Men issue, classic.
Great double. That's a great double splash. That's a
So we
great double
go
splash.
to this right here, where this is where we're setting up everything. We're setting up all the stuff, but a lot of important stuff is happening here. And it has sort of the Dark Knight thing. And that's one thing. You had Dark Knight doing these sort of things, but it giving you a ton of information. But this expands the story so far, like talking about what Argentina stuff is going on. This the structure that's sort of being made, the shield is coming out. It's all this quick setup going along, and then like almost then when you get to this next thing here, like ultimately on the first panel, which is a something that Chris Claremont does a lot, whereas the characters won't talk, but there'll be a lot of description of telling you what's going on here. And one of the things here is like it's cool, but at the same time, with the description, it's explaining to you what happened because it's not a quick turn the page and I understand everything as easily as you would a Kirby thing. And it's a cool page. So it's like there's a lot of explanation in the dialogue. There's a lot of explanation within. Well, this is more that's what the caption is actually Magneto's thoughts, because it said present the master of magnetism. So you have these two sort of narratives going on in here, and it's just classic. And I think one of the things the Image guys did a disservice was not dragging Chris Claremont with them, whether he be the silent partner, and then meaning silent that he wouldn't be the guy, the heavy creative, but at the same time, he really understood how to take these sort of pages that had a lot of action and then add stuff to it and explain stuff, add some personality to it. There's no sort of characterization outside of everybody being heroic. And, this thing of Magneto kind of being, sort of going to the possibility of things not going right for him in this story is kind of hinted in his thoughts. So it's one of the things like this is a classic Claremont sort of thing. Like what do you think about this here?
First, that is a great piece of art. That double page, is just really, really great. And two, I do agree with you. Image Comics should have dragged Claremont over because at least they would have had one person who could actually write, and that would have helped them out a lot. And I'm not, I mean, that's both. That's me slating them, that's me having taken a shot, which I, have a lot of fun with, but it was also true. You needed somebody who could actually tell some stories or give these guys some stories to do. Because to be quite honest, you had a lot of artists and not a lot of storytellers, and they were, again, the guys would come in because they were like, oh, look at these things, but then it's jumping all around the place. But mm, here's the thing that I really get from all of this: the art is so great that you almost don't notice the word balloons, the captions, because
Mm-hmm.
everything seems to fit in. And then if you look at it, it just looks like everything's really busy, like, between the fire, and then but then if you just look at the figures, okay, you got Magneto in in that great pose, okay. Then you came over here, you got Kazar and Rogue over here with the other one. So it's just really good stuff at the end of the day. But it all works. It all works because uh, comics it's a still. It's a still at the end of the day. So if you take all of that stuff away, the action isn't there because the action is the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, these characters are just standing there. They're just standing there and they're not doing anything, or we're not being told anything about it. And that's something that, again, that's something else that you have to be educated to in terms of writing and also in understanding it. That, if you go at it as exposition, okay, you whatever, you can score little brownie points with your friends, but anyone who's been taught, to really consume great literature and understand it, understands that, that dialogue is part of the action. And so if you take that away, you're lessening the action of what's going on right over here. That's anything. I mean, they'll teach that to you with playwrights, because when you're reading a play, it's all dialogue. So that's all of your action at the end of the day. I got to remember that thing with the Matrix, but I think I can chime in on that later. But I mean, right over here, this should be storytelling 101 for anybody who wants to do comics. Okay, all of that. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have that much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and at some point, thought bubbles became, you're like, oh, we got to get rid of that. We don't need to see them thinking over here, and those things became the captions at the end of the day. But why does this work, and why is this conducive towards the storytelling? This should be 101.
Yeah. So with that, I want to stop this share, and I'm gonna go to this classic thing. It's like at the same time when people complain about too much dialogue or too much description and that sort of thing. On the other end of the spectrum, when we are fans of somebody, we just say, "Hey, just keep piling on the dialogue." And when I was, I guess I was in my 20s. I was definitely in my 20s when Pulp Fiction came out. Like the trademark scene was this one here, the foot massage.
How many up there?
3 or 4.
That's count that guy?
Not you.
So that means pilot. What's a pilot?
Well, you know the shows on TV?
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, program. Some don't.
Come on, let's get
Remember
that.
Antoine Rockamora? Half black, half Samoan. Used to call him Tony Rocky Howard.
Yeah, maybe fat, right?
I wouldn't go so far as to call the brother fat. I mean, he got a weight problem. What's the nigga gonna do? Eat some more.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. What about him?
Marcellus fucked him up good. Word around the campfire is it was on account of Marcellus Wallace's wife.
Oh,
So
and
what'd he
also
do,
notice
fucker?
I skipped. You notice how I skipped past. I had to skip past to get that. I know this you know, I went against the grain, skipping past Tarantino dialogue.
Nothing that bad.
Well, then what then?
I gave her a foot massage.
Foot massage. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Then what Marcellus do?
Sent a couple of cats over to his place. They took him out on his patio, threw his ass over the balcony. Nigga fell 4 stories. That little garden down at the bottom, closed in glass like a greenhouse. Nigga fell through that. Since then, he kind of developed a speech impediment.
That's a damn shame.
So I'm gonna stop it here because they continue on this, and it's also a bit at the end where we talk to Marcellus's wife, and she says nobody knows the reason. So you have a little callback, so people feel that's like a storytelling arc. But this was when I was in the theater, I was just like, yo, I mean, there was some funny parts, but this is mad long. And the scene later with Bruce Willis and his girlfriend, where they're in the hotel about to be killed by Marcellus Wallace and nobody's leaving. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Y'all just talking about the belly and this, that, and the other. But it's a style and people really enjoyed it. So I always wonder what these people look at when they see this and they're just like, no, that's good. That's sort of good dialogue. This is what you should be doing. When it's just like, when it's good, you can go on forever. And it's like, I don't know.
No, you got to be fair because Pulp Fiction, okay, these guys, the actors did a good job of presenting that stuff to the point that you as a viewer wanted to hear more. Samuel L. Jackson, the way that he's going about it, you know, and so on, he becomes more compelling. You want to hear more about it at the end of the day. Doesn't mean that the dialogue was great. It doesn't mean that I necessarily wanted to hear more, but I mean, it's one of those points where you hear somebody and they start talking about something, you're like, you know, I want to hear the end of this. And when they get to the end, if it pays off, you're like, okay, great, it was worthwhile. If not, they were like, yeah, man, I listened to it for all this time, but but they were telling it in a certain manner that was compelling, and because of that, it worked. So that's something that's just different, and it's different depending on the mediums as well. Film is different than stage. Stage is different than prose. All of these things are different, so you can't judge them all with the same yardstick.
Now, and this is my last to show that you will allow for talking heads. Sometimes they'll allow because it's, you know, okay. They mainly allow for it when depending on creator, right? So here's the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and there are tons of fun sort of interactions in this book, but I just wanted to use this one as a more talking head sort of piece where you have a decent amount of dialogue, a decent amount of setup for where Paris, like them being in Paris, some like not just directly heads, but comic books at times they've just had an actual literal head and just had them talking for time to time. And it's just some point in the story you had to. I'm just trying to use Alan Moore to say, hey, yes, this is maybe the pinnacle of writing, but at the same time, you need some dialogue here. And then what? Why would I leave this page? He's keeping you on this page. There's so much stuff that's here, you know, and it's like this is one of those books I ultimately thought, you know, for the amount of period, I almost wanted a different artist to kind of do it. But there's so much stuff that Kevin O'Neill has done in here that it's always still a great book to look at. It's still, even though I kind of ran out of steam for me, but this using the basic talking head sort of setup, and this is like, you know, just classic stuff. Like, why would you turn it into, hey, we got to find Nemo later? What are your thoughts on this one?
On
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see the image for a second.
You
That's
see it now?
Yeah, I don't know, that's tough. I'm very critical of the legal story.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it when it came out, and then with subsequent reading, and with the direction it went later, I became much more critical of it. I
Yeah.
thought on first blush, I thought it worked. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure right now, but
Hmm.
that's a lot to because of the over. That's some other stuff that went into the overall story. But at first blush, I thought it worked.
Hmm. So I mean, I'm not even. That's the thing. I'm saying like this is like you can't
What
even.
one other thing I'll say real quickly. Sorry, one other thing.
Okay.
This is pretty much the same scenario that we have without the dynamism of the art that I think Jim Lee brought to the table. Because if you take away the dialogue, what else is going on here?
Hmm.
You got the backdrop, so we get an understanding of we get a backdrop of what Paris looks like as rendered by this particular artist. The colors doesn't allow for too much to go on. Okay, and so without the dialogue, without that exposition, if you will, without this exposition dump, well, what else is going on here?
Yeah. And it gets the thing is that this is has set up as far as the locale and just set up and trying to get all this information of trying to get Nemo into the story. So it's like you're getting you up to speed. But one of the things is whereas that's why I had to utilize Alan Moore to say at some point you just have to do it. And I think that's a line from the what was it from the guy who did the Mission Impossible. It's like at some point I had to give you this information, and I've been trying my best to try to get around it. But at some point you're gonna
Excellent.
have these characters sitting around talking about stuff for page after page after page, and it's like not to be afraid of it, rather than And then I think I wanted to use one other thing, which would be to just say sometimes with the sort of what was it? Is this here? All right. This isn't a ton of stuff. This is just utilizing captions. But like this is JLA2, right? And it's not much here. There's other pages that have more. But it's just like, you know, you have something that's kind of you're not sure what's going on here. It's just a cool page by Howard Porter. And then you can just accent this page by just having some of these what people kind of ran away from captions. You can just help people stay in the page by having setting where the setup is, because you can't really tell it's in Rhode Island and that sort of thing. That sort of stuff, and like it gives you so much other information that's in here about the speed and this, that, and the other. That's just cool. And when you take this stuff away, just saying I got to get to such and such. It's like you lose so much. That's why I'm trying to, and I can go. That's the thing. Going backwards, I can go to like pages with decent amount of dialogue, and it's just like, you know,
Well, I mean, you're gonna have scat pages at the end of the day, but the thing is, where you got 20, like it's like you said, you got 22 pages. If you're
um,
trying to give somebody the bang for their buck at the end of the day in terms of the enjoyment, then what do you need? Okay, you want to maximize on the art and the action and everything you do. You do that with a good mixture of, you're gonna give more panels. Even though I mean that changed in the 90s, where okay, we're gonna do splashes. We're gonna do like splash here, splash there, splash this, that, and the other. But I don't know. I mean, I remember going back and reading John Byrne's Fantastic Four run,
mhm.
and I remember when I started rereading it, I think it took maybe like 20 minutes for me to get through an issue, and my head hurt. I was like, "Oh man, but why am I feeling like I'm working so hard?" And it's because like the modern stuff is like what 5 panels a page. No, people saying very little. All this action at the end of the day, and definitely not as good. So here they're like, "Oh, great, we can get more, maximize this stuff. We get, we're going to get these images to page. We're going to get, a certain amount of dialogue because that's going to support the action or be more action at the end of the day. And then we can, really these guys will be able to get into it, and it's more of a reading experience. I mean, the bottom line, you take it out. What do you have? You have a lot of stills,
Mhm.
okay? And then if it's just a bunch of stills, people, what's the complaint? Oh, they're not doing anything. All right, so now everything's an action pose. They're punching, they're kicking, they're running. Eh, every time you look, they're just moving. It only takes like 2 minutes. It's like a picture book or something. It's like a silent movie. There's nothing that, so there are always going to be complaints. The idea is, are you doing everything necessary to craft quality stories? And if you are, then exposition is going to be a part of it.
And I guess this will be my last since I did mention it. Here is because I think the cartoon kayfabe guys, they really lost it over the Savage Dragon all splash page comic book, like almost saying this is kind of the pinnacle, right? So there's a double splash of that where it has the villain, the overlord,
You mean
killing.
Dr. Doom?
He's the overlord, and he kills Savage Dragon's close friend, and this in this scene, and we have the cool similar type of what's that? John Workman, who did the letters on Thor. We have that sort of set up, but we don't get to slow down here. The villain just says, "So be it." He says, "Jesus," and then next thing you know, we're out of here. And this is an important moment here. This is what the dragon. You're reading the dragon, but at the same time, way comic books worked. This was the cartoon kayfabe guys were kids reading Savage Dragon, and they're just like, yes, page, yes, yes, yes. And as if we go to the front of this, most of the heavy dialogue is them going up to try to run into the Overlord, and we get a lot of the exposition there. But then when he gets to the fight, it gets less and less. There's some parts where he's kind of yapping, but it's one of those things where people kind of looked at this one, and I'm just like, and they still kind of point this out as like one of the greatest double splash pages. Whereas I think
That is one of the greatest double splash pages.
like the whole story, a total all splash page issues, like that's one of the greatest ones, and it's just like
Okay, well,
one of the things,
a lot has changed.
well, one of the things I think John Buscema was talking about doing his Silver Surfer, which all splash page, and he realized in doing it, it was a harder sell because he couldn't utilize his comic book storytelling with the panels. He had basically one panel next to the other panel, and his job is to draw your eye to the next page or the next panel, and now he's doing to the other page, and it's like trying to position this stuff. Some of these pages are just you just turn the page, and he was like, you know, oh, if you liked it, it's good. But it did cause me, and that's one of the things where I don't know with this. It was just like cool page, try to do a cool page, cooler page, no dialogue. I want people to just run by. Whereas you look at I think Frank Miller, he did one in his where he kind of fell into the trap of not having dialogue, which it went too quickly. If you remember the Christmas story of Sin City with Marv, but this book is kind of the way he moves around stuff like manga. So it's one of the interesting things where you not may not even get into the story, but he kind of when he doesn't have a lot of dialogue, he'll still try to play around with time, and that's one of the things you're really dealing with dialogue and pages or pictures are at the time. And I think that's what when you take this away from when you're worried about these kids saying exposition dump, too much dialogue and this, that, and the other,
Yeah, for kids who aren't even buying it.
or even the critics that are sitting around and saying, "Oh, here we go, another exposition dump," like you're supposed to go get popcorn. But then you're like, you don't know what's going on in the movie at this point. You say, "Oh, all the stuff I don't need to hear. Those are the standard villain plot." Then why did you go to the movie? But anyway, I do. I mean, we can be critical on bad dialogue or the stuff that sort of Bendis does, which is sort of overblown, trying to be naturalism.
Those are two totally different things. It really is.
Mhm.
Okay, I wouldn't call it. Bendis is what we call padding. Okay, there's dialogue, there's exposition, there's padding. There's hackery, and they all have their place at the end of the day. So if I'm recommending dialogue to you, I'm going to show you great examples of dialogue, maybe some bad examples of dialogue. But padding, that's what Bendis does, where it's like, okay, I gotta have these guys talk about some stuff, and that's how I'm gonna get like 5 years, worth of stories, at the end of the day, which what I could have done in like 6 months, where I'm gonna make one whole book about these guys talking about, some it's like Pulp Fiction, and then they decided to go exponentially lower, more banal at the end of the day, where I'm
Mhm.
going to start, but let's just, throw in a conversation here about absolutely nothing that has to do with this. And then later on, I'll make it important.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of the things where it's like, well, if I do a callback, then people say, "Oh, see, it made total sense. See, that really makes sense." So it's like,
You brought
well,
it all together.
so I just don't rush to your jumps to the exposition dump. Like, yes, at the same time, we don't want Trinity dying and talking for hours, right? That's when it's a problem. But at the same time, we're just ready to pull out our sign and be like, "Oh, exposition dump. Oh, we're trying to give us too much information." And it's like he just started. So it's like, let's trust the sort of process of we're going to get these things where we're not asking for silent films, right? And we're not going to, and there's no stage in that, but we're saying when action comes, we want it to be more sort of like what a real fight would be. Yeah, but the other time there'd be a part where the two people are bloody and they're scared to hit each other because they both hurt so bad. They don't know if the next fight is going to lead to them being killed on the floor. It's not reality, the guy gets up after he gets thrown through three walls, but you know, and yeah, and that's thing. You can't call a comic book into a movie like in a movie because the movies aren't. And that's the thing. Muhammad Ali talked through all the fights, even the one he lost. Like the times he lost, he was still, oh, you hit like a girl, like that sort of thing. And it's like, yes, but this comic books kind of takes it into sort of a synergy, that sort of thing. And there's even a Watchmen sequence where who's that guy? They're using flashbacks in between the stuff where Ozymandias is fighting the owl and the night owl and Rorschach, and it's like someone's coming with a knife. Then it's like all this dialogue, and then there's a flashback, and the next shot he grabs the pen or whatever it is, and it's just like this is the pinnacle. Like they, and he's like, this dude can't do any wrong, and it's just like he's playing with the form because the form is utilizing as much dialogue as you can. At some point when you weren't, it was just like service order. Next time, next day, this, that, and the other. Oh, we have to do X, Y, Z. Move on. Not spending any time. That sort of thing. So it's one of those things where I think we're being a little too trying to be in the know type of deal and say, oh, this is bad. Oh, look at all this page with all this description, and so it's one of those things where I think you should just be a little less critical. So, yeah. Let me. So, with all this said, ultimately, exposition is not the fan or the audience's enemy. At some point, you need to explain some stuff, and at some point, the characters need to shoot the breeze. I think one of my understandings of it was when I was writing one of my early screenplays, and I was just like cutting right to the chase, and it'd be like one page. It was like literally like a short, but then it was just like, and I see that with a lot of other people's shorts, and it's just like you kind of kill yourself or shoot yourself in the foot, not exploring the scenes, not having characters interact, and giving the characters some time to sort of at least play out. Not to say that you're doing any heavy characterization, but just giving some time for you to meet and understand the characters. Or if you're doing a plot of actual like a high concept plot, a super villain thing, you need to have these scenes where they're just talking. You can't have them doing action and cooking and doing all this stuff, explaining all this stuff. Because I know when was it Robert P. Key having action and story where they do something at the same time while they're telling you the plot. It's like you can't always do it. At some point they're sitting across from each other having the chess match, just talking and not even having a chessboard there. But the chess match is the heat scene where they're just kind of there. And they're just sort of like, eye to eye. So, any last words on your part?
Well, I'll probably not be as generous as you are. If you're resistant towards the exposition, it really shows that your education is lacking and you don't really know anything.
Yeah.
Exposition, the biggest problem is that they're able, there's all this dissection of how stories are made without the understanding of why you need those particular components. So if you understand why you need the components, then you understand their importance to the overall story. And if you stop listening to writers who tell you, oh, because pretty much the thing I see a lot of writers promote is characterization. Well, hey, there's more to a story than just characterization. So once you get an understanding for that, you realize, okay, I need this here. in order to make this stuff better. Because not the characters, without exposition, a lot of these characters are flat because they don't tell you anything about themselves because they're not speaking. Well, they need to act, show, don't do. Hey, dialogue is also a way of showing. Okay,
Mhm.
just because these are characters inside of a story, dialogue is also a form of action. So a lot of times they are showing you through the dialogue, showing you through exposition, those sorts of things. It's when they're explaining everything that we might be getting out of hand. And understanding the difference and having a good knowledge of it, that also goes a long way. So please take that into mind before you start slating it. All you postmodernists out there, here, take a break. Read a book, and enjoy it. And on that note,
Spinner rack
out.
out.